Russia is hiding its aircraft from the Ukrainian web. Slovakia declares its support for Ukraine, says our president. And Donald Trump claims that the US has lost India and Russia to dark China. What should we expect next? The main news of Friday, September 5th, in the summary edition of TSN on the National Marathon, is brought to you by the 1+1 channel. Greetings to you, unbreakable Ukrainians. 5 dead and 2 wounded. Shelling continues relentlessly in Donetsk region. 3 residents of Kostiantynivka and 2 civilians in Lyman fell victim to Russian strikes. Homes and infrastructure have been damaged. A strike drone attacked the village of Kotimlya in the Kharkiv region. A 25-year-old woman who was passing by and 2 road workers were killed. 3 more of their colleagues were injured. The drone also struck a house in Pitseredne, injuring an 18-year-old girl and a man. After the shelling, a resident of Kupiansk was also hospitalized. Russian artillery struck the Dnipro district of Kherson. From under the rubble of a private house, rescuers recovered the body of a deceased woman whose identity is being established. In the morning, an enemy drone attacked a civilian car near the village of Urozhaine. A man was killed and a 13-year-old boy was injured after stepping on a petrol mine. In the Sumy community, the enemy targeted critical and industrial infrastructure. Large-scale fires were extinguished under extremely difficult conditions. The occupiers shelled emergency workers who were operating in the areas of Volchansk, and it was only by a miracle that no one was injured. And the day before, 3 men were wounded in the region. In Zaporizhia, 7 people were injured as a result of enemy attacks. The Russians launched nearly 400 drones and 6 guided aerial bombs at the region. Stepnohirsk and Malotokmachka suffered the most. 5 people were wounded in the Dnipropetrovsk region in the Sinelnikov district, where drones were flying in. 4 people were injured. A 64-year-old woman is in serious condition and another woman was hospitalized from Nikopol district. Russian artillery struck there. And in the Kherson region, the Russians killed a local farmer, Oleksandr Hordienko. The occupiers treacherously attacked his car with a drone while the man was working in it in the field. The deceased was the owner of a farming enterprise, had 30 years of experience, headed the Regional Association of Farmers and Private Landowners, and was a member of the Regional Council. After the deoccupation of the right bank of the Kherson region, he cleared hundreds of hectares of fields of mines and transported about 5,000 anti-tank mines by truck. He became known throughout the country because he personally defended his fields from enemy drones, shooting them down with a rifle. "They hunt me and I hunt them," said Oleksandr Hordienko. We extend our condolences to the family of this brave Ukrainian. The Russian army advanced in the Sikhinove area in the Dnipropetrovsk region, according to Deep State's reports. The occupiers have also achieved some successes in the Kharkiv region. Meanwhile, in neighboring Sumy region, they are redeploying their forces to other sections of the front, specifically to the south. So the number and intensity of attacks there have decreased somewhat. Overall, according to the General Staff's calculations, there were 172 combat engagements on the front over the past day. The Pokrovsk direction remains the hottest spot. There, Ukrainian defenders repelled 47 enemy assaults. This was reported by the General Staff. The occupiers are also actively trying to advance in the Siversk sector. Nearly 30 attacks had to be repelled near Hrihorivka, Sibryanka, Yampil, and Ronivka. There were also about 20 assaults each in the Novopavlivka and Lyman directions. Despite the enemy's superiority in manpower and heavy weaponry, our troops are putting up a worthy resistance. Ukraine's membership in the EU is the best guarantee of security. This was stated by the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, during a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Zakarpattia. He emphasized that sanctions remain the main tool for exerting pressure on the aggressor state. Costa stated that in order to force Russia to stop the war, additional sanctions need to be imposed. He also noted that preparations for a new package have already begun in Brussels, and a European delegation is heading to Washington to coordinate actions with American partners. Europe has already given up most Russian energy resources. Imports have been reduced by 80%. But the rest, mostly purchases from Hungary, still need to be stopped. And it is precisely this position that will be decisive. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, it is currently blocking the process of joining the European Union. The President of Ukraine assured that Kyiv is ready for dialogue. And there in Zakarpattia, President Zelensky also met with the Prime Minister of Slovakia. This meeting attracted special attention. Everyone was waiting to hear what Fico would say, especially after he met with the Russian dictator Putin in China 3 days ago. Earlier, he stated that he wanted to discuss with the President of Ukraine the strikes on Russian energy infrastructure. So what did Fico and Zelensky talk about, and what did they agree on in Zakarpattia? We will find out in just a few minutes. TSN correspondent Varichka Kushik is ready to tell us all about it. We are waiting for her live report from Uzhhorod. Meanwhile, the mood among those wishing to join the coalition remains gloomy. At least its final part, when participants called Donald Trump about this, is reported by the German publication Bild. Allegedly, the US president placed responsibility on Europe to increase pressure on Russia. What was the conversation with Trump like? What security guarantee plans for Ukraine were actually agreed upon? Radio Svoboda correspondent Zoriana Stepanenko on the behind-the-scenes details of the Paris summit.
The summit in Paris showed that the number of countries ready to defend Ukraine from future Russian attacks is growing. The French president speaks of 26 countries, but according to Radio Svoboda's sources in EU diplomatic circles, only about a third of them are actually ready to send their troops to Ukraine. The West learned about the preliminary plans. First, to freeze the front line, and this is the foundation. Without it, no movement or deployment of ground troops to Ukraine is possible. Next, according to NBC News, they may create a vast demilitarized zone that would separate the positions of Ukraine and Russia. Control over this so-called buffer zone, according to the Washington Post, would be exercised via satellite by peacekeepers, the UN, or other observers, possibly from countries that Russia considers more friendly. The next step is a significant strengthening of the Ukrainian army, which is seen as the main guarantee of Ukraine's security.
We need to turn Ukraine into a steel porcupine, unpalatable to current and future aggressors. This means having permanent armed forces that are strong, well-equipped and modern. Our defense industry is accelerating cooperation to achieve this goal. Europe will continue to train Ukrainian soldiers.
The foreign military mission will be led by France and Britain, and their bases will be located far from the front line. There are various estimates about how many European troops might be sent to Ukraine. Western media are talking about 10,000. We've heard that this number could be 3 times higher. Today, Volodymyr Zelensky chose not to focus on the numbers.
We understand which countries are ready to implement this. And also regarding the issue you mentioned, that there is information about the deployment of 10,000. Again, I won't talk about the numbers, but what's important is that we're discussing all of this. Yes, it will definitely not be in single digits, but in thousands. And that's a fact, but it's still a bit too early to talk about it.
Among the resolved issues are how to act if Russia attacks again, as well as what the role of the United States will be. Citing European officials on the ground, reports say there was a willingness expressed to provide command and control capabilities as well as to help protect Ukraine's airspace. Macron is expecting more clarity in the coming days, and according to the New York Times, the coalition of the willing also used the conversation with President Trump to try to persuade him to impose additional sanctions against Russia. But these attempts appear to have failed. President Shaki turned towards Europe. He reproached it for buying Russian oil and for its weak pressure on China. They agreed that Trump's advisors would discuss joint efforts for further restrictions with the head of the European Commission. Ursula von der Leyen has already discussed these issues with US Vice President J.D. Vance. But more importantly, there is a sense in Europe. It is not worth expecting a decision from the US president on secondary sanctions against Russia right now. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Svoboda, especially for TSN 1+1. Marathon, United News.
The Ministry of War instead of the Ministry of Defense, it is expected that today Donald Trump will sign an order that will initiate the renaming of the Pentagon in the United States. Trump himself, the day before, announced his conversation with Putin following talks with Zelensky and European leaders. Today, the President of the United States posted on Truth Social a photo of the leaders of Russia, India and China with a caption, "It seems we've lost India and Russia to the deep, dark China," wishing them many years of a happy future together. What could this mean? Let's talk with TSN's special correspondent in the United States, Olga Okoshelenko, who is joining us live. Olga, let's start with the Ministry of War. Why? And who are the United States planning to go to war with?
I wish they weren't planning to go to war with anyone. At least when Donald Trump came to power, he said during his inauguration that our success will be measured by the wars we do not enter. And Trump keeps repeating that he has already ended all wars, at least 2, the Russian-Ukrainian and the Israeli-Palestinian. But yes, numerous sources in the White House report that today he will sign an executive order according to the working schedule of the President of the United States. This will take place around 11 p.m. Kyiv time, and it will initiate the procedure for renaming the ministry, or as they call it here, the Department of Defense, to the Department of War. This was actually confirmed by the future Minister of War himself, Mr. Hexy, who reposted the relevant news on the X network, adding his own comment, Department of War. Why did they decide to do this? Trump had previously stated that he considers this name to be politically correct, because allegedly until 1949 the department was called exactly that. And according to Trump, the United States won 2 wars during that time, the First and Second World Wars. However, after the end of the Second World War, the ministry was indeed renamed to Defense to emphasize that the United States was focused on defense, not on war. For the final renaming, approval from Congress will be required, as well as, of course, funding. For example, the previous administration during Joe Biden's time renamed several military bases, and all the organizational changes cost $39 million. However, the money was spent in vain because the current Secretary of Defense canceled that decision and reverted everything back.
Well, one would hope that this will help decisively stop Russian aggression against Ukraine. Trump announced that we will talk with Putin soon, but it's not yet known when, about what, or under what circumstances.
Yes, Ala, yesterday Trump said that he is in excellent dialogue with Putin and will speak with him soon. And today he posted on Truth Social a photo, an image you already mentioned, with Putin, Modi and Xi Jinping together. And he added the following text from himself. It seems we have lost India and Russia to the deep, dark China. Wishing them many years of a happy future together, end of quote. And this is not the first such post, at least this week. Earlier, on the day when Xi Jinping held a military parade that gathered the entire club of dictators, Trump publicly wrote that he asked Xi to pass his regards to Putin and Kim Jong-un. At a time when they are, I quote, conspiring against America. Trump's complaints about losing India don't seem very reasonable, since he was the one who imposed 50% tariffs on India, after which India's Prime Minister Modi went to China, a country not only in conflict with his own, but one with which India had recently been in a military standoff. But Trump really did show Putin numerous signs of respect, meeting with him in a grand manner with honors, and now such a betrayal. But when a phone conversation between Trump and Putin will take place is still unknown.
But in any case, this phone conversation will take place as a consequence of the meeting that happened the day before between Trump and the European leader Zelensky. Is it already known exactly what was agreed upon there?
Yes, but officially the White House has not reported this. There have been no public statements about this phone conversation. However, citing sources in the press, information appeared that Trump allegedly told his European colleagues during this conversation that they must stop buying Russian oil. Supposedly, in just 1 year, Russia earns 1.1 billion euros from this, and that there is also a need to increase economic pressure on China. As for whether Trump himself is ready for decisive action, such as imposing sanctions against Russia, so far he has shown no signs of this. The whole week passed under the sign of just a few more weeks, which he supposedly needs, and then they say everyone will see that something will happen. Meanwhile, NBC News today, citing sources in the president's administration, reports in its article that Trump's pessimism regarding the resolution of the war is growing, and according to the article, the president of the United States does not want to ruin his relationship with Putin, something he has repeatedly told his closest circle. The fact that he communicates freely with both camps, so to speak, is something Trump considers his advantage. And that is precisely why he does not want to impose sanctions against Russia. Moreover, for example, India has shown that sanctions against it push the country into the arms of China, which was not part of Trump's plans. A European source, speaking on condition of anonymity, also told NBC that they are disappointed that the Trump administration is not imposing new significant sanctions against Russia, which could help bring an end to this war. Hello?
Thank you, Olha. As we can see, given Trump's mood and actions, we really have to remain cautious, but still stick to our own course. Thank you. Special correspondent for TSN, Olha Koshelenko, was live with us. A hot night for the occupiers. Thick black smoke and flames rose above temporarily occupied Luhansk. Social media users were quick to share footage of the blaze. They also reported a whole series of explosions at an oil depot in the southern part of the city. Fuel for the enemy army was supplied from here. And the fiery show began after a drone attack. As usual, friendly drones also paid a visit to Russian oil refineries. They tested, among others, the Ryazan oil refinery, one of the largest in Russia. Its capacity is over 17 million tons of oil per year. The local governor reported that 8 UAVs were shot down in the region. There were no casualties, but debris fell on an industrial facility. And judging by these shots, the fire was intense. The fact that both attacks were carried out by Ukrainian defenders has already been confirmed by the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Magyar Brody. Ukrainian soldiers say that striking Russian oil refineries is a special kind of satisfaction, because it is the oil refineries that supply fuel to the occupying army, and on top of that, they burn especially fiercely. Natalia Nahorna's film crew managed to see how Ukrainian drones strike Russia and then track on Russian social media what was achieved. And we ask our viewers not to worry that our report is revealing positions to the enemy. The locations of future launches are constantly changing, and the fighters of the 1st Battalion of the 14th Regiment of the Unmanned Systems Forces do not see any threat to their safety in this material. Verified.
What is this? We didn't go to the oil depot anymore, not at all.
This is the launch point for our long-range drones. It's a secret location, because this is where preparations are made for deep strikes to launch drones far into the enemy's rear. The soldiers of the 1st Battalion of the 14th Unmanned Systems Regiment are in high spirits.
It's just incredible how happy they are.
But they themselves say that the real emotions are still ahead. This is a dose of Ukrainian fury flying to cause an uprising in Russia. And we will be waiting for the results. Kasper, the battalion commander, is showing us the aircraft, and in moments like these, he always wants to be close to his men.
Today's paradise, just like it used to be Kiev, Moscow. Today our paradise is Ukraine, Russia. It's going to be a lot of fun, it's going to be funny, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to burn, it's going to blaze. I think it will burn so much that they won't know what hit them.
Kasper warns that you can't let your guard down here. The Russians are constantly searching for where our drones are launching from.
Listen, it's always dangerous.
The launches are taking place on the Day of Remembrance for the fallen, so today the names of our comrades are here.
For all the fallen.
And not just for the adults. We know the drones will fly toward Russia, but as for exactly where, we can only guess.
Look, if some oil refinery is on fire, it wasn't us. It wasn't us, it was some good drones launched by who knows whom.
The number of aircraft heading abroad will remain classified information. How many planes are taking off?
Enough. I'll just say enough. Remember, it's like with that Rolls-Royce. When asked about the engine's power, the answer was enough.
But the operation can be considered successful even if just every third drone manages to break through the Russian air defenses.
These
drones are smart.
It already knows its target, where it's flying.
And they're expensive.
But the damage they'll cause will be with a coefficient of XXX. So all of this is economically justified.
And for each drone, it's a one-way trip.
It will be death for Ukraine.
Good luck, little one, go on. And so, on command, they take off into the sky one after another. Kasper says we'll find out about the consequences of the strike from outraged Russians.
That's enough stories for today, but what about us? Well, friends, you're all involved, but what about us?
Now all we can do is wait. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Krasnodar region...
Do you really think it's a UAV?
It's already on fire. Residents of the region report that near Gelendzhik they hear sounds that, I quote, resemble explosions. In Krasnodar, they're counting so-called bangs. The local mayor urges city residents to remain calm and trust only official sources.
Yes, indeed.
So-called official sources report that there were 8 explosions, the drones were flying low and buzzing, a fire broke out, but at the moment it's unclear exactly what's burning.
Here now!
The oil refinery is on fire, visible from Yablonovsky. Residents are being asked not to take photos or record videos.
Here?
Again. Then they clarify that only fragments fell. Only one technological unit was damaged. The fire covered an area of 300 square meters. Supposedly, 30 drones were destroyed, and yes, it was an oil refinery, with a capacity of 3 million tons of fuel per year.
Something still reached the oil depot, there's black smoke coming from that side, and the emergency workers said that it really is there.
Air traffic is being restricted in Volgograd and Sochi, and ground routes are also being blocked, including the Yablonovsky Bridge and nearby streets.
We didn't go to the oil depot anymore.
We won't go to the oil depot anymore because it's burning hard, all around the perimeter. Smoke is rising.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones continue to keep flying and operating.
You can hear it, there it goes. There it goes.
This is already the Samara region, the city of Syzran. An even more powerful oil refinery, 8.5 million tons of fuel per year.
They're shooting at it just right now.
They're probably shooting at it. We need to get out of here. All of Samara is covered in smoke. Everything is black. Something's blowing up again over there. A drone struck.
Judging by the locals' comments, this isn't the first time something has hit here.
The refinery is burning again and there was a siren.
The Russian emergency alert asks people not to go outside. Planes are being grounded at the local airport.
Let's go, or they'll close Samara too.
Official reports state that some drone attacks were prevented, and they only mention an attempted attack. While Russian oil refineries were burning, the night in Ukraine was not an easy one. Shaheds and ballistic missiles were flying at us, but these attacks did not go unpunished.
Natalia.
Nahorna i Horsiri, Oleksiy Tsober, Pavlo Sadovnikov, TSN. One verdict. Marathon United News.
Meanwhile, the Russians have relocated their strategic aviation to the Ukrainka airfield in the far east of the Russian Federation. And during attacks on our territory, they are now using fewer aircraft. This is the result of the special operation Pavutina, the security service of Ukraine. This was reported by the head of the SSU, Vasyl Malyuk, during a press conference dedicated to the release of a postage stamp in honor of Pavutina. Ukrposhta presented a symbolic postage issue for the 34th anniversary of Ukraine's independence. Its print run is 300,000 copies. The postage stamps depict a truck and drones attacking Russian military airfields. The SSU revealed the Pavutina operation on the first day of summer. At that time, FPV drones struck 41 aircraft, over a third of Russia's strategic aviation, at the Olenia, Ivanovo, Belaya, and Diaghilevo airfields. The strike hit Tu-95, Tu-22M3, and Tu-160 bombers, which the Russians used to attack Ukrainian cities, as well as A-50 reconnaissance aircraft. The enemy's losses as a result of Operation Spiderweb amounted to over $7 billion, says Vasyl Malyuk.
They are now operating with a smaller number of aircraft. Indeed, that's true. They were forced to relocate their strategic aircraft to the easternmost point, which is the Ukrainka airfield. And now, in order to approach Ukrainian territory to the launch cities, they have to cover a very long distance. Of course, we are not stopping here, and we have invaluable operational and combat experience. And many other interesting and unique operations are planned.
And now we return to Zakarpattia. Today in Uzhhorod, a congress of local and regional authorities was held, and representatives of the EU joined in to discuss ways to rebuild Ukraine and the prospects of our country's integration into the European Union. And it was there in Uzhhorod that President Zelensky met with the Prime Minister of Slovakia, and everyone was waiting to hear what Fico would say after meeting with the Russian dictator Putin in China 3 days ago. What did Fico and Zelensky talk about, and what agreements did they reach in Zakarpattia? Liv, our correspondent Mirichka Kuzik is ready to tell us more. Mirichka, hello. It was expected that the energy issue would be the key topic at this meeting. And what did the politicians say about this?
Hello? Alla, this meeting drew special attention. This is Robert Fico's first visit to Ukraine after his trip to China, where he met with Putin and was supposed to discuss Kiev's attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Therefore, the topic of energy infrastructure became the key issue in today's negotiations. Fico emphasized that the information about the alleged position of Putin regarding an energy blockade of Ukraine is not true. According to him, the conversation was about bilateral cooperation, and not only with the Russian president, but also with more than 10 other state leaders.
There was nothing like that in the conversation with President Putin. Nothing of the sort happened with President Putin. We talked about the possibilities of bilateral cooperation, just as I did with the president of China and Vietnam during our important meetings.
The Prime Minister told me about his contacts in China. We saw who was there and who said what, and how important it is that Putin does not perceive such visits as indulgences. There is no alternative to peace, and we stand for peace. And the war must be ended. And it is Russia itself that must do this, as the only entity that started this war.
Fico assured that Slovakia seeks peace for Ukraine, but expects respect for its own national interests, especially in the energy sector. At the same time, Volodymyr Zelensky said that he told Fico about his conversation with Trump, in which the US president condemned European countries for purchasing Russian energy resources, and also assured that Ukraine is ready to supply oil and gas to Slovakia, but only on the condition that it is not Russian oil and gas.
Russian oil, like Russian gas, has no future. If America continues to be this resolute, it will significantly change the situation and become a factor that will definitely guarantee that Russia will not wage war. Ukraine is currently responding to the recent Russian strikes on our vital energy facilities and will continue to respond decisively. However, we very much want this devastating war to ultimately end, bringing peace and stability back to our nation. But no one will simply endure in the darkness. They will not just passively accept their fate in the shadows, for hope always finds a way to shine through.
Despite different emphasis, the parties described the talks as substantive, and in Uzhhorod they also agreed that in October there will be a meeting of the Intergovernmental Commission where joint projects, particularly in the energy sector, will be discussed in detail. Hello?
Thank you. Our correspondent from KTSM, Richka Kurzik, reporting on the negotiations in Zakarpattia, where Volodymyr Zelensky met, among others, with Slovak Prime Minister Fico.